The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is a new title set in the same world where we will most likely battle Ganon once again. However, what is the story behind the game, and what will happen? Well, we actually already know all of this.
What do you mean, Wily? The game was just announced!
Well, that's true, but we could have actually known what would have happened in the trailer of the second game after the Great Plateau, and today I will explain why. Now, all of this starts on the beginning area known as the Great Plateau, a large region of land that is secluded from other parts of Hyrule with steep slopes that prevent anyone from traveling to and from it without special equipment. This is the first area of the game. As soon as you create a new file, Link will wake up in the Shrine of Resurrection, and you have to go through a number of trials in order to start the actual game. The reason why you do this is to get the paraglider, because otherwise you will fall to your doom when you try to leave. Now, most people would think that you don't get to experience the whole story after completing only the beginning tutorial section. But we actually get way more information than all of us would have ever imagined. Because the only active inhabitant of the place is called the Old Man, who's a mysterious, elderly fellow with a deep knowledge of the Sheikah, and tells us everything we need to know. After doing a couple of things for him, like clearing shrines, he rewards us with the paraglider and reveals that he's the old king of Hyrule who was taken down by the Calamity Ganon. And before we actually leave, in order to defeat the gigantic malice being that's kept in Hyrule Castle, he gives us some backstory. And this exact cutscene gives us so much information that we can actually puzzle together the story of both the first and the second Breath of the Wild game.
But Wily, he just talks about the events from the first game. How will this explain what happens in the sequel?
Well, you're right, for the most part. A lot of the stuff that was mentioned back then has a completely different meaning now. But before we get into this, I just want to say one thing. The voice of the king reminds me so much of Robin Williams, it's insane. It's not even him doing it. But that doesn't really matter right now, so let's get into the story. To know Calamity Ganon's true form, one must know the story from an age-long past. The Demon King was born into this kingdom, but his transformation into malice created the horror you see now. Now, these two sentences already tell us a lot, and actually explain why we see Ganondorf in a malice form in this entire game, which was never really seen before. In all the older titles, like Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time, and A Link to the Past, we saw him in a real physical form, and he never tried to recreate a new body because he always had one. So why was this the case in Breath of the Wild then? Well, like the king already says, the Demon King was born into this kingdom, meaning that he actually had a body at some point, which we have finally seen now that the new trailer for the sequel is out. And after that, he mentions the fact that he started to return in his malice form. Now, the reason why he did this is quite logical. He couldn't do anything with his body, which is finally confirmed now thanks to the stuff shown in the recent trailer. The only reason why he was ever seen in this form is because his body is some sort of locked in place. And there's also another good reason why using his human body wouldn't really work for him. The Gerudos won't accept him as their leader anymore. As most of us Zelda fans know, he keeps reincarnating as a Gerudo, and being the only male of his people, he is their king and god. In almost every game, he got full control over this humanoid race and uses them for his evil plans a lot. However, some people of this tribe have also turned against him, like Nabooru, who rebelled against Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time because she does not approve of his ways. And something similar to this also happened in Breath of the Wild. Here, all civilizations of Hyrule work together, including the Gerudo. So if Ganondorf would come back in his human form, then the Gerudo would reject him, or even take him out. This, together with the fact that he's stuck in place, forced him to return as Malice instead of an actual being. His human form just isn't that useful anymore, and so he returns in this Malice form. We can even see this in the drawings from 10,000 years ago, so he has probably been doing this for a while. So this already explains for the most part why we see him return in this form instead of his usual self, and also confirms that Calamity Ganon was just a puppet. Now for the next part of the story, which goes as followed. Stories of Ganon were passed from generation to generation in the form of legends and fairy tales. But there was also a prophecy. The signs of a resurrection of Calamity Ganon are clear, and the power to oppose it lies dormant beneath the ground. We decided to heed the prophecy and began excavating large areas of land. It wasn't long before we discovered several ancient relics made by the hands of our distant ancestors. These relics, the divine beasts, were giant machines piloted by warriors. We also found the Guardians, an army of mechanical soldiers who fought autonomously. This coincided with the ancient legends, oft repeated throughout our land. Now this actually explains so much of the entire story of Breath of the Wild that together with the first part we talked about, it could explain the broad story of the first game and even the sequel. Because the prophecy that he mentioned is very, very important. Because the king and his people thought they were talking about the divine beasts and guardians that were left behind. So they started to look for them, found a bunch and got them back up and running, making them prepared for what was coming. Their old legend from 10,000 years ago even confirmed this, so they thought that they found the right answer. However, they were wrong. Very, very wrong. Because it wasn't talking about the divine beasts at all, but actually the mummified body of Ganondorf that was sealed under Hyrule Castle. It's still creating malice, coming back time and time again as this dark beast known as Calamity Ganon. That's what the prophecy was hinting towards. Ganon's body that was still causing problems. If they solved that, then Calamity Ganon would have never returned. So the royal family and their allies made a fatal mistake by going for the Sheikah technology instead of the source of the problem. And this had consequences, which he mentioned right after, because he said, the princess, her appointed knight and the rest of the champions were on the brink of sealing away Ganon. But nay, Ganon was cunning, and he responded with a plan beyond our imagining. He appeared from the deep below Hyrule Castle, seized control of the Guardians and the Divine Beasts, and turned them against us. The champions lost their lives, those residing in the castle as well, and the appointed knight was gravely wounded and collapsed while defending the princess. And thus, the kingdom of Hyrule was devastated absolutely by Calamity Ganon. Thanks to their wrong interpretation of the prophecy, they all met their end, because the ancient Sheikah technology just wasn't the right answer. They were defeated, and even if they won, then the Calamity Ganon malice cycle would never end. That's most likely why the music from Breath of the Wild 2 is the game over music from Zelda 1. Because Zelda and Link realized when they found Ganon's body, they got it all wrong. And now his original form is going to return. Sealing away Calamity Ganon at the end of the game was basically useless, because he wasn't a real threat. At the end of Breath of the Wild, Nintendo even hints towards the malice problem not being over, since Zelda says the following.
Divine Beast Varuta. Looks like it's stopped working. Let's investigate the situation.
So at the beginning of the game, you will probably find out about what went wrong and how you could fix it, following the malice all the way to its source, somewhere underneath Hyrule Castle, the same place where Calamity Ganon came from. But how could the forces of Hyrule make such a big mistake? Why did all of this go so horribly wrong? Well, there are multiple reasons for it. One of them was the old tapestry, which was one of the only things they had when it came to information. This clearly showed their ancestors using these machines to beat Ganon. So for them it was obvious to go after those so they could use them again in order to win. The body of Ganon was never mentioned after all, so they probably didn't even know that it could exist. It's understandable that the people never thought that he had an actual body. Another thing that most likely added to it is that the Gerudo probably forgot about the fact that male Gerudos even exist. They haven't seen one in centuries, most likely even thousands of years. So of course they didn't bring up that point as well. Like the king already said, stories of Ganon were passed down from generation to generation in the form of legends and fairy tales. So the history of it is most likely very vague. And so the events of Breath of the Wild 1 happened, and now in the sequel, it's time to finish it all. Personally, I'm quite sure that this will be the general story of the two games combined. But hey, maybe Nintendo will prove me wrong. Just be sure to tell me in the comments what you think. I'm really curious. I want to hear your opinion on it. Is this possibly the story for the Breath of the Wild games, or will something else happen? Be sure to let me know. And in time, we will most likely get a definitive answer from the Japanese gods themselves. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to watch more videos, be sure to click the annotations on the screen right now. Also, click subscribe and the bell button so you won't miss any content. And then I will see all you lovelies in the next one.